Sit down.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. When you're ready, I'll begin your time.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee. I'd also just like to take a moment to thank NCANS. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their support. They are a great organisation, and I would love to see the government acknowledge that. As you know from my submission, I'm a medicinal cannabis user. I'm okay with saying that. I've come to terms with it and I've moved on. I have Crohn's disease, and further to that, my mum has multiple sclerosis, which makes this whole issue even closer to my heart. She couldn't be here today, in part because of finances and obviously some things around her disease. So as I said before, it may not seem like it, but a couple of years ago I was a bedridden, depressed mess at about 60 kilos due to a horrible condition I will have for the rest of my life. And the meds that came along with it brought just unbearable side effects for me. They're mostly outlined, I think, in the submission. It was a bit of a cut and paste job from about 6 different drafts. So hopefully that makes it in there. But azathioprine, hydrocortisone, prednisone, codeine, morphine, tramadol, cyclizine, nortriptyline, zociclone, and some others that I either care not to remember the name of or genuinely just can't. Those are all medications that I had to take. I don't take any of those medications anymore. I haven't done for about 4.5 months now. I've also been in remission for 3.5 months for the first time since my diagnosis. Okay. You can draw your own conclusion as to why that is. But I sit before you today relatively fit, because I'm quite lazy, but definitely healthy. Like I said, I don't have to take those medications anymore. I did that very sensibly. I consulted with my GP throughout the whole process. I made him very aware of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And I was very, very fortunate in that I just so happened to have a GP who was particularly supportive of that. Obviously, he couldn't do too much on a professional level, but he certainly gave me the space to make the decisions that I wanted to make, which I felt I was never given in the 2.5 years prior that I had involvement in the health system. I like to think to some extent that I'm a living proof of how cannabis can be beneficial to people. If you take the time to learn about it and you use it consistently and you use the right products and you use it as safely as humanly possible under our current legislation, it can be incredibly rewarding. I go as far as to say in my submission that I genuinely, hand on heart, believe that cannabis saved my life. I was going through huge issues with all the opiate medications that I was on, to a point where one day I came home from work and I just broke down into an absolute heap on the floor, and I pulled my eyes out like a 5-year-old girl for about an hour, and I said to my wife I just couldn't do it anymore. And I asked her to take all of the medication out of the house, because if it was left there I was going to take a lot more than I should. She, lovingly of course, she did that, which was the best thing that ever happened. Since then I started to use cannabis consistently, and that's how we end up where we are. I find, for me personally, edibles aren't overly practical. I know some people regarding with Crohn's have spoken to the Health Select Committee, completely separate issue. I appreciate that. I know it's a young child, so we'll keep those very separate. But you'll have a bit of an understanding of what people with Crohn's go through on a daily basis. For example, I can now go to the supermarket without shitting myself, to be frank, and I get to live a life with dignity. This law allows people to die with dignity, but it doesn't allow living people the same respect. That's my only real question to the Select Committee, if I'm really honest, is why is it that, I appreciate it wasn't either two of you individuals, but why is it that this legislation is written in such a way that it means that people can't live with dignity, they can only die with it, and in such a way that it means that, like I say in my submission, you expect terminally ill patients to go to tinny houses for what they believe is medicine, and you also expect me to sit there and watch my own mother deteriorate in health to a level where somebody is willing to give her a letter to say, hey, you're about to die, now you can have some relief.
That's not the way that it's written. It's actually just a dispensation from being prosecuted. So
Yeah.
it's a compassionate...
So it's not, you're not saying it's okay, you're just saying we're not
just
going to
saying
lock
we're
you
not
up
gonna-
in jail.
And I think the argument is that until people feel confident that they can have a product that's safe, that when people know that they're terminally ill, they perhaps would take more risks than somebody else.
That brings me back to the submission as well, in which I mentioned that I think people should have the right to grow their own medicine at home. You can do that safely. That is just that you can. No one has ever died from cannabis.
And I think that's where we've got, not sure if you're aware, but because in this parliamentary term, the Parliament has considered a bill that proposed for people to grow their own.
Yeah.
And it was
voted. Absolutely.
So, I mean, we this parliamentary term, we know that we've had the Chloe Swarbrick bill that was voted down. We have a government bill that was voted for, which is why we're here. And that at the end of this term, possibly at the next election, there'll be a referendum about decriminalisation.
Yeah.
I think what
But
a lot
it's
of...
not a binding referendum either, is it?
No. Well,
That's
no
something you always
referendum
forget.
in New Zealand are, unless they go through a process like we did with the flag.
Yeah. But we could have a referendum and absolutely nothing could happen as a result.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's right.
I just want
Yeah, but I just want to... But what a lot of people have highlighted, and what you've particularly highlighted, see, once we create the regulatory regime, and it is deemed a medicine, cannabis, I can't see why that regime couldn't prescribe seeds for people, specific seeds, based on, you know, our full knowledge of what's in them.
It's funny you say that because it's all along the lines of my wife's submission.
Yeah, so we...
Word for word.
So trust us, we are taking this role incredibly seriously, but there are constraints on what this committee can and can't do.
I appreciate that completely.
And we're just trying to be as transparent as possible with people, but...
I think I sum it up with the last bit of that submission when I say that cost should never be a barrier to somebody's well-being.
Yeah.
I don't believe for one moment, and I think very, very few people do, that it's necessary for the taxpayer to be fishing out thousands of dollars to subsidise this medication, or for people to be paying $600 to $1,500 a month for this medication, when the reality is they can grow a product in their back garden or somewhere under lock and key, if you want to get technical about it, that is in some cases going to be superior to the products that are currently available.
And I personally, I believe this is the beginning of us being on the pathway to that. It's just navigating away from the historical reality that cannabis is illegal. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is to address all the issues that you and your colleagues have brought up. So can I just say
if I
thank you.
apologise for sounding grumpy.
Oh, no.
Very early this morning.
Okay. But, yeah, and I'm sorry about the time, but we've just had so many people wanting to speak to us that we've kind of restricted individual submissions to 5 minutes, but all of the organisations that you're all part of, please be reassured, they've all been given 15 minutes, and we see them as a full committee. We have decided to break and hear individual submissions as to subcommittees, but it's actually about keeping this bill on track, getting it back into the House, so that it will be passed this year.
One thing that I was talking to some people about earlier that I just really want to make you guys aware of, which is a little bit of an understanding thing around Crohn's and the way that it can or may not help with cannabis, because I appreciate there's not a lot of evidence out there directly related to Crohn's. There's not, and I accept that. That's reality. It's worked for me, I'll say that, but I accept on a scientific level there's very little. Okay. We often talk about smoking and things like that, for edibles, you would have heard a lot about that sort of stuff, oils, teas, all of those sorts of things. I just want to add, for people with inflammatory bowel disease, or me in particular, I don't really want to speak for other people, that's not fair. the amount of inflammation within my bowel varies significantly at any given time. It could be quite severe to quite limited. I've been very fortunate in the last 4 months that I've had virtually none. But as a result of that, if I consume edibles at a time where I have a lot of inflammation in my bowel, I don't absorb that properly. Okay. But if I eat edibles at a time when there's no inflammation in my bowel, I absorb that entirely and do absolutely nothing for the rest of the day. What I'm saying is that there has been some talk about limiting the way that people consume cannabis. The point I'm trying to make is that some ways are better for some people and other ways are better for other people. And I just think that's something we really need to get a little bit of understanding around, because what works for Bob might not work for John.
Sure. Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Scott.
So,